Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.
There was a tragic mass shooting in Arvada, California, at the King Soopers grocery store in Colorado. Now, in this incident, your Ahmad Alyssa, who was 21 years old, was alleged to have gone to this King Soopers supermarket with several weapons and murdered 10 people, including a police officer. Now, some people in his family are speculating that he might have had mental health problems, but when I take a critical examination of Ahmad Alyssa, I believe many of his alleged mental health problems were caused by him being a textbook beta male, like I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. And it's clear to me from reading about Ahmad Alyssa's background that he was a man in crisis during his teenage years, soon after he moved to this Colorado area. Now, one of the things that these reports don't really want to talk about as related to Ahmad Alyssa is the Islamophobia that he ran into. And I believe that the bullying that Ahmad Alyssa alleged that he had encountered was really a lot of Islamophobia, because Colorado is primarily a white area, and from reports I have read in the New York Post, once the Alyssa family moved to Colorado in that $680,000 home, several white families decided to move from the area because they did not like the way the Alyssas were behaving. And because when I see patterns like that, I believe that there is some racism in that pattern, and I believe that once this boy started going to this high school, he began to encounter Islamophobia, and I believe that Islamophobia was the thing that led to him going from being an outgoing individual to winding up becoming antisocial and allegedly becoming paranoid. And I believe that all of those things led to the deterioration of his mental health, because oftentimes when you have people who move from one area and they have to go to these high schools to these other areas and they encounter this type of verbal abuse, what happens is that person starts to change. And I believe that this male, because he did not have the coping skills to deal with this, because his family probably was in denial about the Islamophobia he was running into, refused to really deal with this issue the way it needed to be dealt with. They wanted to probably move in and try to assimilate into Colorado and try to be like every other white person. But in these areas, there are a lot of white racists and a lot of white nationalists, and the boy was probably being bullied by these white racists and these white nationalists, keeping it to himself and trying to assimilate by doing things like going to the wrestling team. But what was happening was, because he was probably being bullied, he was simmering and boiling in anger. And as he was simmering and boiling in this anger, this was what he was struggling with for years. And he was probably trying to suppress that anger regarding the Islamophobia he was running into and all of the hostility he was receiving at that high school. So I'm believing that this beta male was dealing with a lot of issues as related to racism, as related to Islamophobia, and these were the things that were really troubling him for years. And because he was being troubled by these issues, what was happening was he had changed again from an outgoing person, as his family had stated, into this very antisocial person who was becoming more and more paranoid. And I believe that's one of the things that was going on with this young man as people alleged, his mental health was deteriorating. But when I look at, again, at his situation, he's looking like a man who was in crisis for a long time. And it was this crisis that was something people were not really paying attention to, because in this country, we really do not look at men who are in crisis. We don't think that these are serious problems. We just think, oh, it's just part of his makeup. But this is what beta males, again, do. They simmer and boil in anger for years. And we saw explosions of this man's rage as a result, because they said that he was having a hot temper. But I know the difference between a hot temper, which is a guy who just loses it, and a guy who's simmering and boiling in anger. So when I look at the incidents of him going out here and assaulting one of his classmates, that clearly says to me that that he was simmering and boiling in anger, because I know about what happens when a guy gets bullied. He'll just sit there and simmer and boil in anger, and then he'll just lose it. And then there was another incident where they said he had lost a wrestling match to qualify for varsity, and he wound up exploding there as well, because oftentimes when things don't work out the way beta males don't like it, they get emotional and they lose it. And I believe one of the things that led to this male winding up going to participate in this mass shooting was the fact that he had never really dealt with all of the bullying that he had dealt with, all of the Islamophobic racism he had dealt with in the public school system, and he had never really dealt with all of the rejection he had encountered in Colorado. I believe that when he moved to Colorado, again, a predominantly white area, he was looking for that acceptance. He was looking to become a part of society. And when he saw he could not become a part of that white society and assimilate into that white society, that's when he started to become antisocial, and that's when his paranoia started to take over, because he saw these people bullying him, he saw these people harassing him, he saw that he was getting rejected, he could not get a girlfriend, he saw himself becoming frustrated because he could not make life work in Colorado, and that's when his mental health started to deteriorate. And as his mental health started to deteriorate, what happened was he started hearing about, oh, the FBI is after him, or people are hacking his phone. And that's what he thought was going on. And that's why he decided to go buy this weapon. And he went out here and then went on this murder spree, because his mental health had deteriorated to the point where he just never coped and dealt with all of those other issues as related to him not being able to fit into society, because society had rejected him. And what's really troubling about this situation is most people looked at this guy, they knew he was in trouble, people in his family knew he was in trouble, but they didn't understand how dire things were. I mean, this male, again at 21 years old, is going to buy firearms, and he's playing with a firearm that's almost like a machine gun, and nobody sits there and says, hey, there's something wrong with this guy. And that's what I found to be quite troubling about this family, was he had a sister or a sister-in-law, and they saw him playing with this gun. They take it away from him, but they don't understand. They didn't understand, again, how dire this man's situation had deteriorated. They didn't understand that him buying weapons was a sign of deterioration. But many people don't understand or identify the traits of a beta male in crisis, because they just think, oh, it's just him being eccentric. But no, this is a sign that this male is in crisis. And a lot of times when you see a guy getting a weapon, that's one sign of him being in crisis. Another sign is that male withdrawing from people and becoming antisocial. That's a sign that that male is in crisis, and he's sitting there with his own thoughts, and he doesn't have anybody there to vet those thoughts. And because he doesn't have anybody there to talk to and sound off on these issues so he can get some sort of perspective on reality. What he does is he lives in this world, buying into these ideas and believing that they're true. And what's even worse is we have a series of echo chambers that reinforce the kind of ideas that many of these beta males have. And then it has them going out here believing that they can go out here and participate in actions like these mass shootings. But when I look at this beta male, he fits that pattern and profile I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. He was a ticking time bomb, and he was a ticking time bomb because I believe his family moved to Colorado and the efforts to get him a better life and their family a better life. But because he was rejected by white society, what happened was he wound up simmering and boiling in anger regarding the bullying, regarding the abuse, and he wound up again exploding periodically in these rages. But that rage never really was quelled inside of him. He was still simmering and boiling in anger about a society that had rejected him, because he said on his Facebook before it was deleted he wanted a girlfriend, he wanted to fit in, he could not find a way to make things work or navigate a course towards making things work. And that's one of the things I believe that led to him, again, his mental health deteriorating, him becoming frustrated, and then wanting to explode in this rage, where he wound up going to that King Soopers market with a tactical vest and with this rifle to go and murder people. He wanted to hurt those people the way that he was hurt back in high school. He had never finished processing through those feelings that he had, because he probably never learned how to navigate through his emotions from his father or his mother. And what was really telling to me was he asked for his mother but did not ask for his father. And that again shows me that he had a too close codependent relationship with his mother, because when you have a male who asks for his mother but not asks for his father, that shows me that he was not really close to his father, who had a business in the area. So when I'm looking at this kid, he was struggling with a lot of issues, but there was nobody there to meet his emotional needs. And because there was nobody there to meet his emotional needs, this is what led to him going out here and exploding in this rage that had been boiling inside him for years regarding these feelings of Islamophobia and racism that he had run into. So I clearly see that this is a man in crisis, and we're starting to see a flare-up of these men in crisis. Now, this shooting at the King Soopers Market is the 7th mass shooting in a week, and it comes 6 days after 8 people died in Georgia. And many politicians, they want to make this all about gun control. But this is not about gun control, because in both of these cases of your Ahmad Alyssa and the guy who shot up at those massage parlors in Atlanta, both of these males bought their weapons legally, and both of these males, while they were struggling with issues, there was nothing that a background check could have caught at the time. And the real problem with these beta males is not gun control. The problem is many of these males have been raised in an extremely dysfunctional fashion. They have not been taught male life skills. They have not been taught male survival skills. They have not been taught coping skills. They do not know how to navigate through their emotions. They do not know how to feel but not act. They do not know how to think critically in a situation, and they don't understand concepts like cause and effect, and they don't understand things like consequences for their actions. Many of these males, as I'm seeing as related to this pattern and profile, these males are not getting the proper male life skills taught to them, by their fathers, and they're not getting their emotional needs met by their mothers. And because these males are not being given the basics as related to care in the home, this is why these males are struggling and having a hard time. And this is why many of these males are participating in destructive behaviors and a spectrum of increasingly more violent behaviors. Because many of these males, like Ahmad Alyssa, when we look at all of their behaviors, they are falling into a pattern and profile. But this is a pattern and profile that your FBI really hasn't even done any research on. Now, they say that Ahmad Alyssa might possibly have been on a list for the FBI to watch, but I clearly see that they couldn't have done anything because, again, America refuses to acknowledge the man crisis going on in this country. They refuse to acknowledge the problem we are having with the way we're raising boys to become men. They refuse to acknowledge that many of these males are struggling to find a way to navigate a course in this world, and they refuse to acknowledge that many of these men, they are falling apart because of the dysfunctional way we have raised boys to become men here in America. Because when I listen to many of these reports talking about many of these mass shooters, their behavior clearly fits a pattern and profile, but many Americans, they get emotional about many of the aspects of the stories, like, oh, it's the guns, but it is not the guns. It is the way we are raising boys to become men, because over the last 50 years, we have seen this increase in mass shootings across the country ever since we changed the way we raise boys. Instead of having them raised with a father to teach them the traditional roles of manhood, we have tried to create these new, kinder, softer, gentler males. But these males are so filled with rage that they go out here looking to do harm to society. And that's the most troubling thing, because they were supposed to be the ones who were supposed to lead us to a utopia, but all they do is participate in far more violence than their predecessors, the traditional man who was raised by his father with basic male life skills and basic male survival skills. But when I look at this Ahmad Alyssa, he fits right in line with that pattern and profile. He was struggling to find his way to fit into America. He could not make himself fit in a racist place like Colorado, it looks like. And I believe that was the thing that motivated him to explode in this rage and try to destroy as many lives as possible, because he felt like he could not have a life in this country due to these people. And again, it's not, as his brother was saying and his sister-in-law was saying, it's not politically motivated. This was a man in crisis, just like the man in Florida was in crisis. But many in America don't want to acknowledge the man crisis going on in this country, because to acknowledge the man crisis going on in this country means that we have to, one, point the fingers at many of the politicians back in the 60s and 70s who created many of the policies that, like the welfare policies, and these policies that are meant to cater towards giving women a place in the workforce. And that also means that we have to change our economy, because that would mean the mother would have to come back to the home. And two, it would also mean that we would have to go out here and, again, restructure the family and rebuild the family. And that's something your corporate America doesn't want to do, because the family unit, in a consumer-based economy, they don't want it to go back to being a traditional family. So this whole man crisis, again, is something nobody wants to deal with here in America. We want to talk about issues that come out of this man crisis, like the issue with guns, which really isn't an issue. If you have fathers in the home teaching boys male life skills and modeling manhood for them, those boys are going to have guns and never want to shoot anyone, because from the from the period of 1900 to 1960, we had plenty of weapons here in America, and the homicide rate was at an all-time low. If it wasn't until the feminist movement came along and the rise of the single-parent household that was created by the feminist movement and the welfare state, that we started to see an uptick in shootings, an uptick in homicides, and those numbers continue to go up even after an assault weapons ban in the 1990s. In fact, even during that assault weapons ban, we saw increases in mass shootings, and we saw numerous incidents like Columbine and many others with disgruntled workers shooting up workplaces, all during the time of these assault weapons bans. So that proves that gun control is not the issue here. The issue is we have a man crisis in this country. We are not raising boys who become men who can become critical thinkers, men who can use logic and reason, and men who can think about cause and effect and the consequences of their actions. No, we're raising a group of males who primarily have been taught to be kinder, gentler, sensitive, and more in their feelings. And because they're in their feelings, they're going out here frustrated, angry, trying to make a world work the way a female works, but then finding out that the world doesn't work like that, and that's causing many of these men to become antisocial, many of them to have their mental health deteriorate, and then as it deteriorates, some of them go out here and participate in mass shootings like this individual did in Alvarado, Colorado, and take the lives of innocent people. And if we really want to get our handle on stopping these mass shootings, we have to deal with this man crisis, because just going out here and going after symptoms of the issue, that like talking about guns or talking about mental health, that's only a symptom of the problem. If we want to solve the man crisis, we have to, one, acknowledge we have a crisis in the way we're raising boys to men, and then two, make an investment in developing boys into becoming stronger and healthy men. Because in our gynocentric society, we have spent so much time and money trying to elevate and empower girls, but we have not spent much resources investing in our boys to teach them to become strong, healthy, capable, masculine men, and to teach them the value of masculinity and manhood. No, we talked about how that's toxic masculinity, but the real toxic males are these beta males that are supposed to be kinder, gentler, and softer, and these males are going out here murdering people because they're trying to be soft in a hard world, and when they find out how hard the world is, they wind up falling completely apart, and they wind up either just self-destructing through suicide or drug addiction, or they go out here and they participate in a spectrum of violent behaviors, and some go to the extreme of participating in mass shootings where they explode in rage and try to destroy the world around them. But to stop these males from destroying the world, we have to acknowledge the man crisis, because this incident right here is just, again, we've had 7 mass shootings in a week, and again, as I've stated before in numerous videos, it's only going to get worse instead of better. And the reason why it's going to get worse is because many of our politicians here in America, many of our psychotherapists in America, they refuse to acknowledge the man crisis, and they refuse to hold many of the feminists accountable for their part. They refuse to hold the politicians accountable for their part, and they refuse to work on us. And many in corporate America don't want to try to deal with this by giving us more balanced schedules so children can have more balance. Nobody wants to acknowledge the root causes of this man crisis so that we can start developing and helping boys become healthier men and men who understand how to make the world work the way a man does, because the way the world works for a man is completely different than it is for a woman. And we really, again, need to acknowledge this man crisis because these mass shootings are coming more frequently, and the violence that these males are participating in is becoming far more extreme. And when we listen to the motivations that many of these males have, again, they are fitting a pattern and a profile, and it's sad that the FBI has not really acknowledged the pattern and profile as related to beta males, because if they were to acknowledge that pattern, we could get a handle on this man crisis and really start working towards some solutions and maybe possibly save some lives here in this country and all throughout the West. Now, if you want to learn more about why beta males like this participate in their violent behaviors and why they are motivated to act the way that they do, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find it on Smashwords, the iBook store, and Google Play. And this book has helped so many young men who were struggling in life finally figure out why things were going wrong, and this book could possibly save the life of a man or prevent a man from going out here and doing harm to others. And if this video is not going to be monetized, so if you could donate to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box, it will help me continue to make more videos about men's issues in an effort to help men out here who are struggling all across the country. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant editions of John Haynes